So I'm very excited to be here. And also thank you, Lee, for being the best at pronouncing my very Spanish name. Rocío is actually like very exciting when you get this like little list. Oh, these are, our curated AI roadmap. We're going to do all of these. And usually like they want to do all of them at the same time and with different teams. Fantastic, right? Thank you, everyone. And thank you, of course, Proxify for having me here. A few months ago, I was actually on the other side. I was sitting there and I got inspired from one of the other attendees to come here and also speak. I'm just going to basically share a bunch of like tips and tips that I have collected through like working with clients. I help them adopt AI and also build with AI, either internally or within their own products. So I touch a lot of subjects within that. But of course, something that everyone at some point comes across is the challenges of scaling. So that's why today I wanted to focus on that. Um, and basically, what I see is usually that, there's a lot of excitement with AI. There's one leader who's very excited about what AI can do for the company. So they find a workflow that is kind of like low key and they decide to make it happen, right? And that's great. It's really good momentum. But that actually only works at beginner level. When you just start your own journey with AI, that's of course super important because then you kind of like kick off the mental change, right? It's more about the culture, is about getting people excited, but usually there is not actual ROI. You may save a little bit time, but the ROI is of course locked when you scale it in order to just focus on the incremental gains here and now. So there's actually like three really big mistakes that I see repeatedly. Of course, there's like many other areas that could be improved, but these are the most common ones that I see for those looking into going from AI beginner, getting past the pilots, and then scaling a solution. The first one is having too many ideas that you want to execute at the same time. I love the passion and the commitment from the people that are driving this forward because you, of course, want the champions to make that happen. But obviously, you only stay on the margins of what you can do. It's usually one step in a full workflow, is coming really from the bottom up. So leadership is like happy to perhaps give some budget to that team, but they're not really engaged in the actual transformation. And if you need transformation, you need that leadership commitment because you want to look at the full end-to-end flow. Of course, you don't want to pick like the most difficult workflow, but surely something that like creates a little bit of friction. It needs to be something worth the work and the sweat. So in order to make sure that it's not just one little thing that you're changing, but rather how the business is going to be work, like you rather focus on that bigger value. And surely you should work and think MVP first, but you should do that planning for the bigger picture. You can't just like look at, okay, this is what the MVP will be about. You need to think about like step 2 and 3. That's that full workflow add a lot of value. And I've seen a lot of companies that basically they automated the task. Oh, this summarizes text. Like how wonderful. Or this is like an internal AI assistant. And the question is like, okay, great. This is supporting with HR questions. And what's next? Like, what's the actual big value that you're going to get out of that? So, above all, get leadership involved because in order to get the bigger picture of like where to start and what that high friction workflow should be, you need the strategic view. So, either leadership has already knowledge about AI and what the focus should be connecting to the business, or you should bring someone who has the expertise to at least fill the gap and work together. The second one is optimizing that roadmap to like what AI can do. To start with, just because AI can do it, that doesn't mean that like it should do it. There's like multiple reasons why you shouldn't use AI even if the technology is there to deliver. There's a lot of hype, and when now that agents are so hot, is very interesting to see even the clients that have never been working with agents or even LLMs per se, and they already want to build something in-house, which is, yeah, I understand the hype and the excitement, but of course you have to be a little bit wary and really think first, is AI the best solution for this problem? So do that solution and problem matching, and then even if like AI is a great solution, like does an agent make sense? Or do we need something that is more deterministic? There's also a lot of stall on making it perfect. If you're working with machine learning models, there's a lot of focus on like getting it to the finish line, so it's almost 99% accurate. And sometimes you end up focusing and obsessing so much on that perfection that then you miss out the whole point, which was that once the user tries it, they're like, yeah, we're not going to use that. So not ideal, right? And you've already spent months. The users are already spending too much time on something or not getting enough value. So when you think about what to optimize rather than focusing on like the actual performance of the solution, you should rather be thinking about, okay, how do we optimize the adoption? How do we focus for whatever is going to be the most useful for the users that we are targeting with this solution? And just, yeah, get it out there as soon as possible. And then the third one is got to do with, I mean, I named it governance as an afterthought, although I can imagine that I'm not the only one a little bit allergic to the word governance, with the permission from Ali. Um, but when I speak about governance, is basically like all of the questions related to who's owning this solution, who's going to be ultimately responsible, especially because now there's so much automation that like someone needs to be really like owning that solution. Also questions about like what happens if it doesn't do what it is expected. What is even expected to do? And that's a few questions that you need to share, not only like within the team that is working with it, but also for like anyone else who's going to be using the solution. Because there's nothing worse than like not really knowing like how can I trust this solution. So instead of an afterthought, something that I recommend is usually like just have a quick checkpoint before, just embed it as part of your design. Think about how can we make this solution responsible? If it goes wrong and there are like these cases that like things go sideways, how are we going to deal with them and how can we be prepared for that to happen? Um, so just you don't need to overkill it because there's a lot of you know worries about like bringing in perhaps a legal team or focusing too much on governance. So you can just like ask a few questions, have the conversations, and even bring a legal person, but for them to highlight what could happen. And then you kind of like keep that in consideration. Actually, funny enough, it's happened many times before that you end up with a solution that is not usable at all. Even it's happened to me. I remember one of my first AI projects. This was 2018, so it was machine learning, where we used data that we were not really allowed to use for our solution. And we only discovered when we actually brought in the legal team after piloted everything. Everyone was super excited. So yeah, been there, done that. Please, like, take that lesson learned with you and don't do it. Those are the three mistakes that prevent you from scaling. But of course, AI natives are already onto the next level. Companies that are like forward looking, they're not just not making the mistakes. That's kind of like the baseline. They're already thinking about the future. Like, how do we work? How do we operate? Understanding that AI is going to be part of like all the different workflows that we're on today. The first one that they usually focus on is defining workflows. If it's a startup that is quite nicely starting from scratch, or if not, redesigning those workflows. And instead of focusing on the task, as I mentioned before, just look at everything. Like, what is the full end-to-end workflow? Not only because you understand what's coming next, the steps, but also because maybe you get to remove so many steps. And this example is actually one from a client where we automated the lead qualification process. They're selling B2B. And of course, they don't want to waste a lot of time on like reaching out and contacting people that they can perhaps not easily know, but like you can always put the time to get the answer if they're a good fit or not. So we managed to reduce the workflow down in so many steps. Some completely disappeared, and some were just absorbed as part of like one step within an AI solution. So don't underestimate the power of like redefining the whole workflow, because this is what really makes a difference versus just like looking at. And my recommendation is always like just ask yourself that question. You actually like design the process the same way, knowing what AI can do for us now. The second one, planning for agentic work. I have a couple of this topic because I also found it like super interesting. The first one is build for compound learning. And do we have any engineers here that can raise the hand? Yeah, great. So you've definitely heard of like compound engineering. And I'm kind of like borrowing the term from that as well. In software, and especially with AI, we've now seen the potential that we do have from not only executing a task, but actually like all the lessons learned that you've gathered by executing the task can actually be stored, saved, and used in the future, right? So that's how like AI can learn from like past mistakes, just like a human would do, right? Like we learn from our experiences, and sometimes it hurts, and sometimes it's nice, and then we understand like what works or doesn't work in the world. So we can leverage that compound learning in order to like always get better and make the process better. And I know it sounds perhaps like very advanced, but you can even do this like as an individual user on your like preferred AI tool, Claude or ChatGPT, whatever it is. You can already be thinking about like the tasks that you're using the most. You can even prompt the tool to like suggest what are the tasks that you're spending too much time on that could be automated, and then continuously thinking about that improvement that you can collect in terms of like lessons and data to then bring that little package of experience with you. Our brain definitely has some limits, some context, but is no near like the limits, the small limits that we have for machines nowadays. And given that they're like today, context is still one of the biggest struggles for agentic AI. We need to be a little bit smart. We want to capture as much knowledge as possible for the future, but we also want to be aware of the cost, because the more knowledge you accumulate to use for future tasks, the more it's going to cost. So that's why I also added there, like the cost also compounds. And especially when you're building, it's important to actually reflect the different steps on workflows. What task requires an advanced model versus like when can we go to the cheap one, because it's going to be like pretty uh, straightforward. Yeah, that's for the first one on agentic work. The second one is what I called hybrid intelligence, kind of like reflecting about how our relationship with these new AI agents is going to be. Because we're not going to just use them as tools, we're going to be using them as like a new operating level. I'm talking about it a little bit more in a few slides. But we're kind of like in the midst of redefining what the human does versus what the machine does. And this is extremely important because not only for technical reasons, for responsible or ethical reasons, there's certain things that we will never want them to be automated, even if the technology would get there, right? Today, there's, of course, some barriers, but we will always have areas where we don't want to automate. We don't want like the AI, the decision to be made automatically. You have to be very wary of like asking this question with your team whenever like you're building, deciding, and especially at scale, because at scale and with agentic AI, one little deviation from the goals and the intention goes a long way. And then again, like thinking about agents as roles rather than a tool. AI natives are like understanding that it's about the capabilities of the solution they're able to do, right? Doesn't mean that it's going to replace a full human role, but it's definitely um, in need of getting some problems that have historically been human, but now start applying to the machines. Like the context I've already been talking a little bit about. So one tip that I have for you, if you're already like building or scaling AI, is that like not only context is great, meta context is great. And what that means is that when you're building a solution, it also needs a mind map of how your company works or how your team works. What are the tools that you have available for you? What is the documentation you have available for you? At what point it needs to use what tool, right? Like if you would hire an intern, you basically would need that onboarding for them. And the same applies with like agentic AI. There's been research already done on like how much the accuracy improves combining this meta prompt or table of index. I think our peer Armin was, for example, talking on an article. So something that can really help it a lot, improve the work that AI does. And another part is reflecting about type of work that gets done at the company. Like you do have tasks that can be done independently, and you also do have tasks that like need in a team, meaning like they need different perspectives and different positions in order to make it happen. So if we look at a workflow where we have people from the legal team, the tech team, and so on, like they have completely opposite perspectives. And you actually, in many situations, you want them all because that's how you actually gather all the necessary context from all the perspectives to land into a good recommendation. However, some work, you don't need to do that. And actually, like, it's not really great for accuracy and structuring work to have many AI agents in the same conversation. So you just want that one agent doing the same thing in their little pool, like their workstation. So it's a little bit like humans again. And companies are trying a lot. I think Stripe is one that has been doing a lot of interesting stuff and actually posting about it. They've created their own AI agents for coding and development that they've named Minions. And the way they work around it is they've built virtual machines in the cloud where only that one agent is going to have access to. And they already have like the set boundaries. This is the context you get, what we need to do, and this is what you need to deliver. And then they have an orchestrator, which is not even AI, it's actually software, it's deterministic, that decides, depending on the task, what you're going to get as an agent in terms of like access permission, the tools, like the context, and so on. So that's kind of like unlocking a whole new world of like, wow, we can create a farm of like these minions to produce like PRs all in parallel, and then they just like work on GitHub. It's all connected, and then we can make massive rollouts that are even working 24/7. And then, yeah, access management, permissions, super important, and monitoring. Since Ali may be talking about that, I'm not gonna get too much into it. So I'm just jumping into the third one, which is rethinking the human work. The other side of the coin, of course, we've been talking about how to rethink work with agents. The other side is, okay, what about us? Like, what do we do now? How do we think about this future? The first one is super obvious. You probably all have heard about this. You know about it. I've been training companies since 2023, so it's been a few years now. But I still don't see it happening. It's a bit worrying because it's becoming AI skills and building with AI is becoming so fundamental in our day-to-day work that I actually compare it to like understanding how to work with computers or like with email in the early 2000s. So it's so important to invest in your teams to actually catch up because otherwise that gap is going to keep on increasing. And it's the curious will always learn on their own, but the majority of the masses actually need that incentive as an structured. And then when it comes to the new way, like the new type of teams that we see on AI natives, it actually connects few humans and then a few agents. And how many of you have heard the Amazon concept of the two pizza team? Okay, not everyone. So yeah. So generally, like Jeff Bezos had this framework where he shared that the best size for the team is in between 5, 8 people, because that's when you make sure that everyone is on the conversation, and that's like the ideal to work all together. So you could share like these two pizzas. So now moving forward, we've seen how we've had specialist roles before. Now we're moving more into like T-shaped people. And with AI, we're actually going to become this supercharged human that obviously has like a core specialization, but then is able to become even more aware and capable in many other areas thanks to AI agents. Maybe we can talk a little bit more in the panel about this. So, key takeaways that I really want you to take on with you. The first one is just don't plan the old way. Think fresh, think future, think for the whole workflow. That's like when you're really gonna capture and scale ROI AI. The second is compounding value of AI as a user yourself oops, or within teams and AI solutions. Try to always think about like what did I learn from this conversation, this chat, or this solution that I want to capture for the next time I want to do perform this task. And last but not least, again, super important, like make sure that like your teams are trained, because that's the way forward, and making AI a team effort and not just leadership or champion. Thank you all.